I need to be looking. I mean, maybe I'm better off not looking.
We're on,
I'm not
actually. Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm here with Lexa Juhre, and she's the general manager of Fiddleheads Food Co-op. Has been for a couple years now?
2 years, just about exactly 2 years.
So welcome. I don't think you've been on the show before,
I haven't,
though.
But I appreciate the opportunity.
And it's been a while since we had a show about Fiddleheads. It seemed as though in the early years we were doing Fiddleheads-related shows a few times a year because there were so many updates and things were moving so fast. And I think it's been a couple years now, maybe 3 years since we last did it.
Yeah.
So Fiddleheads just celebrated
the 10th anniversary.
Well, it's hard to imagine New London without Fiddleheads, honestly. But so you've been part of Fiddleheads for a couple years now, and it did go through a lot of transitions before you came.
Certainly.
But what did you do before you came to Fiddleheads? Were you part of the corporate business world or part of the cooperative business world, or no?
I skimmed the corporate business world. I worked for Kinko's for about 7 years and became a store manager. And that was an interesting experience because while it was a corporation, it was a limited partnership with the founder, who is an entrepreneurial sort of person, and he went into limited partnerships with all these people that he grew the business with. And while it was not a cooperative in any sense, it was an innovative business, and it was really customer centric, and I liked that a lot. And then I left that job looking for a better opportunity and decided it was a terrible opportunity, quit that job, and then went to work at my local food co-op where I had been a member for about 15 years just to kind of regroup and think about what I wanted to do. And that was in Albany, New York. And then about a week later, they offered me a job as an administrative assistant person doing things, and I started there, and I spent 15 years there. I started moving on to some point of sale kind of scanning tasks, and then I became the IT person, and I was on a collective management team with 10 other people. That was for about 6 years, and then I was on the board for about a year and a half, and I stepped away from the management team to be on the board there, and then I was part of a 3-person management team there for about 2.5 years before I came to Fiddleheads. So co-ops are deep in me now, and they're a really amazing opportunity to work in, and I really am thankful for that.
And when you showed up in New London, what were the draws, and what were the challenges that you found here that I'm guessing you have found life, plenty interesting?
Yes, I have. In many ways, New London is like a smaller, more intimate version of my hometown, Albany. There's a lot of similar cultural values and political engagement that I really appreciate, but it's smaller and it's easier to really be in community with people, at least in New London proper. I can't really quite say that I have found my connection to all of southeastern Connecticut, which is the larger territory that Fiddleheads is constituted of. But I feel like New London has a lot of potential that is, I know people say that and people are sick of saying that, but like there's something very vital that's happening here, and it's exciting to be in it. And so part of the reason that I was leaving was there was just change in philosophy around how my old cooperative was being run and what direction they wanted to go in. And basically all the people on the 3-person management team felt like we weren't the right people to be taking the new direction. And I really wanted the opportunity to be a general manager. Being on a collective management team is really interesting, and you learn a great deal. But it's interesting now to be able to be the person that actually is responsible for making decisions and working in policy governance, which is sort of a formal relationship where the board sets out specific expectations and limitations on what the general manager can do, and then gives you free rein to make decisions within that framework. Has been very educational and liberating. It's kind of rigorous because there are things that you really need to learn about in order to manage all the aspects of the business. But I like it a lot. So
it's kind of funny because it really is not a lot like what you think of as a regular corporate thing. It almost feels like when I was on the board of education our relationship with the superintendent of schools more than being businesslike exactly.
It is, I mean, like, I haven't really had a corporate environment. I mean, I've distinctly stayed away from a formal corporate environment, I think. I really like working collaboratively with people. I appreciate the open sharing of ideas and having a real dialogue about I mean, the whole thing about cooperatives is to benefit the collective group, the owners and the community around them. And so doing something that is collaborative, that's a discourse, is really important to me. And you just don't get that so much in a corporate environment. So I don't know if you get that in the school system, but when you do, I'm sure it's great.
Hopefully you do. Well, I think, at least for me, and I have been shopping at Fiddleheads, since it opened. When it first started, this was way before you were involved. The original would-be founders were conceiving of a cooperative in Mystic. Mm-hmm. And when I went to an early meeting of that, it's like I was not interested. Like, that direction just did not speak to me at all. They were looking to be located where people were young and affluent, and it's like, wow, you're not even interested in me. I'm too poor, I live in New London, I'm too old. And so even though it was a cooperative, it looked like it was appealing just mostly to the people with money in Southeast Connecticut. But as soon as the decision was made to locate in New London, it was a huge change in direction, but it was a really important one.
Yeah, it appealed to me that it was in downtown. I mean, I grew up not in a big city. I mean, Albany's not a large city by any means, but I grew up taking a city bus to school. I went through public schools, and it's the state capital, so there's just a sense of, like, you had a certain freedom as a kid that you don't have in the suburbs, and there's just things about being connected to a semi-urban framework that's important to me as a person. So, like, even though New London hardly qualifies as a metropolis, I wasn't seeking a suburban enclave. But I think that really the values of the co-op, I mean, the first end of we have end statements at the co-op, and so statements of purpose, essentially. And the first one is to be an inclusive, healthy, and robust community, like that we exist to facilitate that. It actually says to provide that, but I've interpreted that to mean to do as much as we can to facilitate that. And to be inclusive, I think you have to create access for people who don't have the means that are afforded to you by, like, money. And so like, I think that it was fortuitous to locate in New London, because while certainly some of the demographic that might shop at the co-op are centered in Mystic and Stonington and New London and Waterford, the density of our membership now is based in New London. Like, we have about 3,100 household members now in southeastern Connecticut. And we don't have current addresses for all of them, but about 2,500 we do. And of those, about 750, I believe, are in New London. So given and it's sort of geographically dispersed pretty evenly out east and west. And so we draw from a pretty decent trade area. I think that many of the people, not all, who are living in Mystic can afford to come and shop in New London, and the converse isn't necessarily true. So I think that economically, for ethnic diversity, for all sorts of diversity, that being located in New London was a better game. I mean, a better way to do it. But I think that was partly luck. I think there was a space, and there were people who were visionary enough to say, even though we don't know exactly what we're going to do with this space, we're going to take it and we're going to make something of it. And the incredible determination and work that has gone into forging this co-op, really the grassroots effort that came together. And in my older co-op, it was 40-year-old co-op, so I missed all of the founding. There was a time where that was also totally a worker co-op, and there were no paid staff, and it evolved over time to be a much larger institution. And Fiddleheads is now coming into its sort of like its teen years, and I talk to people about, like, when they come together to form a co-op, like, I joined as a worker in Honest Weight because it felt amazing. Like, it was partly because I was getting a discount and I was getting some
Right.
direct benefit, but I met people that I would never have met. I intersected with people that knew about all different scopes of the world that I didn't know. And we'd talk about things just while stocking groceries or doing everyday tasks to make the cooperative work. And I think that it becomes something you sort of fall in love with. And so then when I came into Fiddleheads, I was coming in on the heels of kind of like the empty nest syndrome, where you're letting your baby go off to school, and like, you know, suddenly you're like, I'm not doing that anymore, because the worker program had ended before I came. But the volunteers, I don't really like calling them volunteers, really the cooperators who made it possible, are incredibly, I mean, it would not exist without any of them. I mean, they really collectively needed to come together, and, you know, people were calling each other, you know, 4 a.m. saying, can you open the store? Because this person's not gonna be able to open it. And there's a certain dynamism and excitement when you realize that, like, you can collectively make something happen. And it seems sort of mundane, but people need food every day, and you're getting good quality food. You're keeping some level of control over some part of the food chain. You know, we're now a food system that's pretty much entirely dominated by corporations. And so you have any little piece that you can hold back from that, I think, is compelling. And so then people fall in love with it, and then it's very hard to figure out what's the next step. And so that has been a challenge for me, coming in to figure out how do we not create, because it's not a forced thing, how do we facilitate that kind of dynamic collective participation in making this community better as a cooperative that's really staffed.
And to me, it's really interesting that the growth of Fiddleheads has dovetailed with a real movement to having people live in the downtown area of New London. We're seeing some gentrification, but that isn't everything that's happening. We are seeing a lot more people moving into apartments that are being developed, you know, on 2nd and 3rd floors of commercial spaces. We're seeing some neighborhoods getting revitalized that are within walking distance of Fiddleheads. And previously, people who lived there, who might live there because they didn't need a car, didn't have a place to buy food that was within walking distance or biking distance.
Right.
And so Fiddleheads really met a huge need. It's so ironic to me that, you know, if you go down Bank Street, like, there are pharmacies, like, you can't go half a mile without seeing a different big pharmacy chain, but there was no real place to buy real food.
Right.
There were convenience stores, but not
Well, that's
real
what's happening
grocery stores.
all across the country. Is basically you have, I won't mention any chains, but
Right.
like there's, you know, you have box stores in large formats and small formats that have just eliminated the real market for independent business, and, you know, in a large sector. I mean, not completely. And I think that, you know, when I was a kid, you could walk one direction in 2 blocks to Lemmy's Market, which is Italian, and you could walk 2 blocks to the other one, and I think they were, anyway, they were like Albanian or something. You could buy really great lamb from them. But, like, you know, they were family-run markets. Now I'm 50 years old, so that's over. And now we have boxed frozen meals in freezer doors and convenience stores everywhere. And it's interesting to me that while New London does have supermarkets, and some decent supermarkets, they're not contiguous with where people live for the most part. And New London is so
Right.
spread out that I think that there's not even a natural geographic space for it to exist. And so Fiddleheads is actually in a pretty good location.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'm originally from Philadelphia, so I think, you know, it appeals to me also that this is sort of a city kind of store.
Yeah, I guess it is. I don't have much frame of reference for outside of that, I guess. But, you know, I do. I mean,
Yes.
I've been to many co-ops in Vermont, and I think it's sort of a nice blend, because it isn't as large, and there are some stores, especially newer stores, that there are two different models that are emerging with co-ops. One is the model that Fiddleheads chose, which is basically like, we'll pull together, we'll do a member loan campaign, or we'll build some capital to get started, and then we'll get rolling. And the other is to do a really large capital campaign and then develop and launch a store. And they're both viable. They're both good. They're both good economic models. I don't think they each have quite the same feel for the community. That one is more about ownership, and the other is more about like making something happen. And the making something happen part is what appeals to me most. And it's like really creating sort of the soil for something to happen. So, I don't expect that we're going to do anything particularly revolutionary, but at the same time, having people who are already in connection with each other and reacquainting themselves with each other. And we have different programs like the Neighborly Nickels. We do like a donation for 3 different nonprofits each quarter, and so people get to choose if they bring their own bag, they get a nickel and they put it into the bin, but that money then goes to the nonprofit of their choice. And so there are different ways that we're sort of layering levels of connection. And I think that then, when organizations need help with something, like if, Fresh is gonna have their plant sale the day before our Earth Day event, and then if they have leftover plants, they bring their plants and they sell them at our store, that we kind of have this sort of natural, kind of relaxed way to cooperate with each other. And it's bringing me into other things, like I've been a part of the New London Food Policy Council for a little bit now. I've been joining I can't remember what it's called, the Health Collaborative. And just seeing how different leadership groups are coming together to try and improve the quality of life in New London and the surrounding area has been really valuable.
Now, I can't imagine that there are people watching the show who have never been at Fiddleheads, but just in case there are, I did take some photos of the store, because although it isn't huge, there's a lot you can buy there. And so we were going to do sort of a virtual tour. I have to apologize for the poor quality of the photos. Most of them were taken with my phone because my camera was MIA this afternoon when I decided I really wanted to do this.
Yeah, and I apologize that I didn't have anything to supply you in the time we had.
So this is the start, the front of Fiddleheads. If we can see the first slide. I hope. Maybe, maybe not.
Well, while we're waiting, I can say
yes.
that.
Oh, here it is.
There we go.
And this is actually an oldish picture, but it hasn't really changed much.
That's probably just as well. Yes, not too much has changed. We could probably use some more foliage, so that's good that that's got some.
Yeah, it's been a pretty grim winter.
It has, yes.
So we go in and, I took a picture of this because it's just sort of, I don't know, demonstrates how many community things going on have some connection with Fiddleheads as the store, but also everyone who shops there.
Yeah, I mean, there's things about holistic health, there's arts events, there's people looking for kombucha mothers, there's all kinds of different things that are posted there. We did start moving business cards into a separate book that's down on the right there, because they were starting to overwhelm it becomes a little bit of managed chaos at some points. So we're trying to manage it while giving everybody a fair shake. My vision, ultimately, I would love to have one of those big kind of round outdoor posting things like a university has, but they're very expensive, I've learned. But because it brings it out to where other people who aren't necessarily coming into the store. I mean, we have hundreds of people who go into Camp Dog for lunch and come away and never walk into Fiddleheads.
Right.
And I think that there's maybe a perception that there's no overlap, but there definitely is, And so you might want a hamburger today, but you may very well want really good sushi tomorrow, or good salmon, or we don't actually sell sushi today. I'm sorry, but you might really want excellent quality vegetables that are locally grown, and so this is a place where you can get a number of local products. We have probably I wish I'd brought my statistics. I think about a third of our sales are to local products, which is pretty impressive.
That's really amazing because, the more, especially as like the organic label gets, compromised might be too strong a word.
Perhaps softened or weakened.
Yes.
It's not, I think it still has a lot of value, but I think that it doesn't capture all of the values that we want in our food. And so it becomes an easy way for people to label the thing and sort of get away from the underlying nutrition and holistic for the environment.
And local is really important, not just because you're eating fresher, but fuel to move stuff around. It's a finite resource, really. So at one time, people ate mostly locally. Mm-hmm. They really didn't have a choice. I think a couple hundred years ago, someone would eat an orange because they got it as a Christmas present.
Right.
They weren't accustomed to going into their marketplaces and being able to buy fruit in New England that had to be grown, 1,000 miles south.
Right.
And here in this picture, you see, we do have access to that stuff.
We live in a time of tremendous abundance and tremendous scarcity simultaneously, right? So we sell a tremendous number of avocados and mangoes and bananas, but we try to make those fair trade. And in fact, our bananas and our avocados are always fair trade. And so we try, when we're sourcing from someplace further away, that we're ensuring that there's some connection to the people who farmed and gathered and transported those goods to us to make it, to pay our dues for being able to have that kind of, that we can scope the world and have all the things.
Right.
I want coffee like everybody else.
Sure.
I want chocolate, but I can't compass having that be at the expense of, at the tremendous expense of quality of life of people. I accept that I'm enmeshed in an exploitative world and that I'm somehow complicit in that, and I'm doing my best to find ways to fight against that. And I think that buying local is a way to not only support fresher food. I mean, certainly if you've had a fresh egg, you can never go back. And fresh vegetables are just, our kale is enormous and beautiful, but it's that they're also supporting the sustenance of local people that are in your community, and you're keeping a more heterogeneous economy. You're keeping, even the designers of economy will say that the small business is the engine that keeps things moving forward in capitalism. Well, we are a small business, and we support hundreds of other small businesses. And frankly, most chains are not set up to do that. So even, some of the ones that claim to really specialize in local and foraging for local products, they still have very specific needs of how much volume they can demand, and when what their delivery terms are. And we try to be as accommodating as we can within our limitations, which are pretty flexible, to make it possible for people to bring stuff to market and develop their business.
And here's some more, you can see some of the produce that you can get at Fiddleheads. And one thing that I think has been the case since the beginning of Fiddleheads is that things are marked. If something is locally sourced, you can find out where the farm is. And it isn't just produce. I mean, when we take a look at the dairy section and there's a lot of local businesses, local farms that are supplying to Fiddleheads customers.
Yeah, with the produce, we're specifically trying to label it with an icon from the specific farm it's coming from. And we're working on that through Center Store to do more. I mean, we call out, if it's local, and we'll name the farm, but we'd like to be giving some producer profiles or staff picks, little vignettes at the point of sale, at the shelf, to give people an idea of because it really does matter that not only for just keeping agricultural land in production in Connecticut. I mean, Connecticut has a tremendous arm at the state level for promoting agricultural tourism. And I think that that's a value to Connecticut, but it doesn't have necessarily the best ag laws as a farmer. So I think
Right.
that really supporting farmers in everyday ways is important if you want to keep the land green.
And Connecticut, I guess geographically is kind of interesting that way because there is a lot of agricultural land, but it doesn't lend itself to huge farms,
It does not.
which may be just as well.
Well, it's fine. You can do a lot with very small farm formats, yes.
Yeah, but it does require, I think, that kind of connectivity.
It does.
Among the farmers and the farmers markets and the retailers and and probably the institutional buyers as well. I don't know. I suspect that the Food Policy Council has thought about the different ways to connect the growers with all of us eaters in whatever spot we're eating in.
Yeah, there have been initiatives. I don't think they've really. There was talk of trying to build a food hub that didn't really go forward. So it's very difficult in this in a land that's not principally agricultural to make a really sustainable food shed. So I think, and certainly retail is sort of outside of the consumer. Really, just grow it. Grow your own food. But if you can't grow your own food, then buy it from somebody who grew it next door. And then if you can't buy it from next door, grow it from somebody down the road or 30 miles away. We do define local as within 100 miles of the co-op. And that's partially because depending on what commodity you're talking about, it may be harder to get organic strawberries that are within 30 miles of the co-op. So if we can get them from 100 miles, we will do that and we will name them. There's certain, but you tend not to source things. You tend to source things as closely as possible, as long as they're of really high quality. So we'll get some carrots from the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts, but they're really good carrots and they give us an excellent price, and they are a farm co-op themselves. So it's like there's lots of layers that go into the purchasing decisions, but basically when we're supporting local, we're talking about anywhere within 100 miles, but principally within, I would say, at least half of them are probably within 35 or 40 miles.
Well, 100 miles doesn't sound that bad in today's world because, even for us, if we're traveling, 100 miles can be a day trip by car.
Right.
So it isn't as though it's some place that has to be flown in, or even if it's trucked in, that it would be days and days away. So it seems to me that that's quite reasonable. It feels.
I mean, it's arbitrary to some extent, and it's different co-ops will define it slightly differently. But I think that you're trying to define some kind of a region that doesn't really have boundaries. I mean, there are definitely people who will go to the city or go to Boston in a minute and not think about that being as too far away. But if they had to drive another 5 miles to go and buy the groceries they wanted, that would be too far. So we're sort of bound by our own definitions of space. So.
And I wanted to point out, even though it's Fiddleheads is not really a large store physically by supermarket standards, it's got a huge variety. I think in this last photo, you can see potatoes and sweet potatoes, and there are at least 4 different kinds of sweet potatoes there.
We do have a variety of sweet potatoes. We have Hannah's and Garnets, which are your typical sweet potatoes, and typically we have purple Japanese sweet potatoes. We find that there are certain varieties that our customers will, as long as there are enough customers to sustain something, we will carry it. So there are occasionally things that we'll try that have not really panned out. We'll try to bring in things on demand and give them a shot. We do have a book up front. It was actually in that first shot with the bulletin board where people can write in things that they would like us to carry, and we'll look into seeing if we can find a distributor to find them. And we'll give it a shot. So that's another way that the community actually drives what's in the store. I mean, yes, partly it's because you're buying it, but also partly you can request it. And we do special orders too, especially for owners.
And so I just took some pictures of some of the aisles just to give an idea of what kind of variety of goods are available, and you can't tell on most of these, but you can on
Yeah, that's
some.
our wellness department.
Yes, and that's been a huge department almost since the beginning.
It's still growing well. I mean, I think that wellness and taking care of oneself in a more holistic way is becoming, well, maybe by default necessary as healthcare devolves. But I think that there's a lot of things that we don't know about how, certainly like herbs are a tremendous source of medicine, basically. You're not supposed to call it medicine, but for their healing properties of herbs, that there's a whole section of tinctures that's sort of in the center there between the blue, and there's distillations of herbs and other plants that have specific health benefits to people, and you can't buy them in the grocery store or in the drugstores, and there's a lot of we do a lot with skincare that's really clean. It doesn't have any petroleum byproducts, and it's not tested on animals, and so there are things that there's a market for that people, and increasingly you're seeing those encroaching into
Right.
I don't know. We're pleased to see that the world is rejecting the
Right.
petroleum byproduct, but it's not that we're as unique as maybe in the skincare as we once were, but I think that we cultivate a collection of really high quality products, and we try to price them as competitively as we can.
And then, well, I'm not even sure what is in
It's
all
a
of
baking
these.
set. That's
really
maybe baking and nut butters. That's the Alive and Well is not the best photo, but it's got kombuchas. It's raw foods. It's live food. So it's sauerkrauts and kimchi and miso and kombucha. So it's
and
things
there's
that are
self-serve kombucha that I couldn't get
to
the picture.
Oh, that's true.
Into the photo, but it is available as well. And the far right is hard to see, but that's the vegan.
That's vegan dairy. So it's there's some great cheeses from locally that are made that are vegan, and then there's there's cottage cheese, cream cheese, yogurt, mayonnaise. That's all vegan, and meat analogs, which are the right door. You can't really see, but sausage-esque.
And then the next is the meat,
because this is the meat and seafood.
And this was a decision that was made by Fiddleheads, I think, from the beginning, that some co-ops are meat-free. And I think from the beginning, Fiddleheads felt that it wanted to serve as broad a section of the population as possible and not just be exclusive.
Yeah, I mean, I personally feel like that's the right approach. I think that again, it should be driven by the selection, by the people that are buying. So if we pick something up and it doesn't sell well, we're not going to try and keep selling it. But I think that it's not my job to be like a gatekeeper onto what diet people need to pursue. And I think that there are lots of different personal preferences and health concerns and just economic things. There are all kinds of factors that go into what one chooses for one's diet, and so we try to provide everything and then let people select what they want.
And a lot of that is local as well.
Some of that is, yes.
I know some of it is not, but it does have some characteristics that it usually isn't the typical factory farmed.
True, right. No, we will select like grass-fed beef and organic beef. We have organic chicken, and we also have hormone-free, naturally raised, non-organic chicken. It's very difficult in Connecticut to get fresh meat from local farms because there's a real dearth of processing facilities. There's basically not enough opportunities for people to process and it's very hard to make money at it as a farmer as well. So we do carry local chicken whenever we can. Dairy is an easier opportunity. There's lots of eggs and but the meat is the hardest thing. We do carry frozen meat that's local, and that's pretty much all the time. But it's hard to keep, it's hard to turn enough, and it's hard to just source local meat.
Now, this is on a totally different subject, but I think the idea of being able to get things bulk is a huge part of co-op buying. You know, we have some communities now that are thinking about like bans on single-use plastic bags, and you know, a lot of what we buy in supermarkets now, I mean, you're really paying almost as much for the container as
Certainly.
you might be for what's inside of it. Certainly on, you know, in the spice aisles where you're buying, you know, 1 ounce of something that's in its own glass bottle. Well, here you can bring your own glass bottle and
Yes.
get it weighed and buy 2 nutmegs.
Well, I think the thing for me is that you can buy as little as you need, like to try a recipe or something, so you can experiment. The packaging is really important, but I think the freshness is also really important, because when you're buying something at the supermarket, you're now paying for it to be transported and processed and packed, and then shipped to probably a distributor, and then shipped to in a glass jar. So there's a lot of packaging and transportation that's going on there, but it's also just time. And so most of the herbs that we get are I don't know if I can say, the Frontier is also a co-op. And they seal their herbs in foil bags, and when we get them, we turn them within a week or 2. So you're buying something that was sealed pretty recently at a factory, and then you can use it today, and then not have to have it on your shelf 2 years from now when you make that recipe again. You can buy fresh marjoram. You know, you can.
Right.
So.
And the variety is amazing.
It is. I'm very pleased. The co-op I came from had an enormous bulk department, and one of the things that I was very pleased to see when I came to Fiddleheads was its commitment to bulk. So it's herbs and teas and spices and grains and nuts and cereals and fruits and candy, but not as much, not so much candy, and really the encouraging to cook, right? To experiment with different ingredients, to try a different grain, or just making your own trail mix. Things that are just, it encourages you to experiment. It encourages you to decide, like, what do I like about my diet? What do I want in my diet? What do I need today? And you can buy just a little bit and try it.
And maybe buy more next time, and
maybe
never.
Buy 25 pounds of oats the next time, because people do that as well. You know, come in and buy in bulk, really bulk.
Then this is just, you know, another example of what's on the shelves. There are things like cookies and snacks and chips, and the aisles, as you can see, you can't see it in all the pictures, but the aisles are very well marked. That is something that was not always the case in Fiddleheads.
Yeah.
There were times when if you didn't know where something was, you were, well, doing a lot of searching.
We still play a few games. We have some things that are just not in the best spot, and we're looking to reset again. But we've tried to really, I will say that the interim general manager who came before me, Winston, did a reset of the store, and she did a really good job. And I'm sort of resting on her laurels on that scope, because I haven't moved things around that much. But we're kind of getting due. We're realizing that, like, we're sort of maxing out the number of cardboard shippers you can have in the aisles. Like, we just need to kind of reorganize a little bit. But I'm glad that you feel like it's well laid out and you can find things.
Yeah.
And certainly our staff should help you find anything that you can't find. We do.
And I guess we should talk about the staff a little bit too, because it's not typical to, well, for one thing, you see the same people all the time, you know, if you shop frequently, and you do feel like you know them all. And they have specialties and but they really, you know, they're all helpful, and you feel like you're part of the co-op and they are part of the co-op. We're all kind of in it together.
Yeah, we really are blessed with an excellent staff, and it's a pretty interesting mix of people with very different life experiences, but a real shared commitment to service. I mean, I think it is a labor of love to work at the co-op. It's you know, we're working on having currently we're unable to offer benefits, for example. That's something that we're really working on, and so it's not a lucrative profession, the working in the co-op necessarily. but it is a very vital connection to something that's purposeful, and people gravitate toward that and bring like an immense amount of life experience and skill to the job. And so we're really grateful that we have such an excellent group of people. And basically, yeah, their purpose is to figure out, how can I help you? What do you need? And mean it. So.
And it's a very diverse staff in terms of age as well, ethnicity, and it, unlike some stores where you see a diverse staff in a way, but within one particular role, you might only, like, you know, the cashiers might be, I don't know, young people of color mostly, but the people stocking the shelves might be a very different group. That is not the Fiddleheads impression.
No,
Everyone
I think that
everywhere.
we could be more diverse. You know, I don't think we represent New London as a whole effectively. But I think that we do draw from a really wide variety of people. And I think that we try to draw out the talent that people have and apply it the best, you know, place them in the best place that they're going to flourish. Excuse me. And definitely on age, we're pretty diverse. That's true. And I think that certainly being receptive to the whole community is really vitally important.
And I have just a couple more pictures of the shelves. There really is a lot.
It's kind of densely packed. I mean, it is sort of it's an older. The building itself used to be a grocery store before, as many people who are from here know, and we've tried to reinvent it into a much different store. But it's pretty densely packed, and it's got sort of older style shelving. So it's but we do have quite a diversity of product. I mean, it's hard to kind of go over it in this kind of format, but we do invite everyone to come and just step in.
Yeah.
No one will bite you. Come on in and see.
Right, and here's like the refrigerated area cheese. There are both local and imported, and
that's something I think people don't know, is that we do have now, we've developed a kind of nice selection of, I mean, it's both imported and local, but artisanal cheese with different textures and flavors, and so, you know, bries and aged Goudas, and, you know, so we have, and we'd love to grow that, right? So it's partly what the demand will bear. So we've experimented with some things that people have enjoyed, like seasonally, but won't sustain over time. So we're also willing to continue to bring in foodies and tell us what you want. We'll bring it in, because we're all pretty much foodies.
And this is I just have a couple of
there's a lot of like both local and fair trade goods that are in our mercantile. So it's general merchandise in our language, but you know, socks, candles, bags that are made from recycled materials. There's a lot of crafts, and there's pottery and things that are made by people in developing nations, where they're able to, you know, sustain their families and get a viable wage. And there's a lot of fun little things. Like if you need a gift in a hurry, you know, for under $15, you can almost definitely find something. And we're open 8 to 8. Little shameless plug every day.
That's very, and you know, and beer. I guess I'm kind of and I do have a photo
you kind of
of
wrapped
some of the
around to
other.
the end of the store. Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so now
we're
you've wrapped around to
sort
the
of we're
front
kind
of the store.
we're kind of at the
So
front
beer is
of the
kind of
school.
tucked away. It's sort of facing the freezer aisle and the mercantile stuff. And then you come around to the front of the store, and then now you're coming from the registers
and now
into
you
the
can
bulk
see
aisle.
the bulk grains and the cafe, which is sort of a place where people sit and meet and
It is.
eat.
It's a kind of nice little space. I mean, it's we're actually in the process of trying to think about how to reset it, because right now we make coffee on sort of the customer side, and that doesn't seem to make any sense. And so we're thinking about rearranging it, but mostly to give a little more seating. And it's a kind of nice little niche. You know, people come and talk with each other, and there are some people who are regulars who come, you know, once a day. And then there are people who are just stopping in town or at court and come over and find it, you know, unexpectedly. And we're not ready, but we're working on doing prepared foods in-house. And so I would say by midsummer, we should start having things that are consistently available that are made in our kitchen. And so that's exciting. And but we're still planning the process and figuring what the menu will look like, because we want to make sure that we deliver really consistently high quality food. So small format to start, grab and go kind of thing. But that's one thing that's been a gap for us, is not having a consistent offering of things that are ready to eat every day. So.
And when I was there taking a picture today of the cafe, someone said to me, that this should be in it, because it just sort of, without being able to read all the little Post-it notes, it's sort of illustrative of how there is community participation in the co-op.
Yeah, I was actually pretty happy with how this turned out, because somebody suggested for our 10th birthday, we needed some kind of activity to kind of get feedback from our owners and from our shoppers. And that's something that we're still trying to get a more developed system for. We just hired a marketing person, an outreach person, and I think that we're working on finding the best ways to reach out, because social media is great for immediate kind of feedback, but it doesn't give you sort of the depth. And then people who have long-standing connections to the co-op will freely, give opinions and ask questions. Right. But people who are new to the co-op tend not to feel that it's theirs. And so how do I create that sense that, no, this really is your store? And so what we did was we took this underlying graphic, which is a tree of like ecology and food and nutrition and health and community well-being and individual well-being, and we asked owners and shoppers to post, like, where does the co-op, what value does the co-op have for you in this sort of matrix? And we got a whole host of leaves of different answers. And so it's spring on the impact tree, it bloomed. And it was really neat to see a lot of things about individual wellness, a lot of things about a sense of community, and a real layered connectedness was very evident. And that was sort of the model of the tree, was to show that, like, yes, it might not seem like a lot, that that we compost everything that we can that doesn't get sold in the produce department, but like that makes a difference, and that those things that you do each day, those incremental steps, make a difference. And so how do we keep remembering that as a community? How do we stay connected in the everyday way of being connected to some larger picture of the earth?
Now, you have a couple of events coming up.
Oh, we do.
And I'm kind of doing this backwards, but the annual meeting. So
the annual meeting is going to be Sunday, April 29th at All Souls Church, and from 4 to 6. And we're basically doing we're doing something a little different this year in the fact that we're opening the meeting with voting. We've had some difficulties in May getting enough attendance, partly because it's the first beautiful weather, and who wants to come inside to a meeting when it's beautiful outside? So we tried to move it up a little bit, and so we decided that we're opening the voting at the meeting. So there'll be a meet the candidates and food social time from 4 to 5.
And I have actually a picture of the current.
There's the current board, yes. And we have 3 slots available, and we have some candidates who've announced, but the deadline is April 20th, so if you'll have 2 more days or so when this airs to announce your candidacy, you're welcome to come. There's information on the bulletin board and on the website about the election and candidacy. And so then the first hour will be like a social and meet the candidates, and then the business meeting will start at 5. We did get some feedback last year that the meeting didn't start as quickly as, we didn't have quorum, so we were delayed, and we said, okay, well, we're starting the meeting so people know if they want to get the information, this is the time. And there will be on the agenda, there's some proposed bylaws changes. They're not, they have to do with how a member of the board who's appointed gets ratified, and whether or not they need to be ratified by the membership. So that's something that people can also read about on the website. And then there's the election itself, approval of annual meeting minutes, and I'll give a presentation around like sort of the state of the union of the co-op, where we are fiscally and what we're doing next, although I've given some of that away here.
And this weekend, there are some Earth Day activities.
That's true.
And I am going to just quickly go through this. We have 5 more minutes, so I'm going to have to give up this computer in this slide in about 1 minute.
That's fine. So yeah, so from 11 to 2, we're doing some events, and there's going to be seed starting, as it says, and then there's going to be some music, and we're going to have kids activities, kids arts activities, and we are going to demo smoothie bike. Yeah, the pedal powered smoothies we've been kind of craving to do something that's interactive and fun and promotes consumption of fresh fruit. So
Yeah.
we're doing that. And it's also going to coincide with the Walk for the Homeless. And so we're going to offer beverages and stuff to the walkers because they're going to be walking right past us. We encourage you to participate in that as well. And it's basically a feel-good time and gathering in the center of New London.
Okay, so I'm giving this up, and so we can do a community calendar, but we have about 2 more minutes.
Okay.
So if people want to learn more about Fiddleheads, where's the best way to get information?
Well, I think one, if you're an owner, definitely come to the annual meeting because I think we're looking to find out. We're looking to answer that question for you. How can we provide that information best? Our website does offer quite a bit of information. We are very responsive on Facebook. We are available to you in person, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Well, you could ask us questions. And I think that if you're interested in how the governance of the co-op works, that the board is very receptive to questions and giving information. If you're interested in product sourcing or understanding more about what we how to influence what we carry, like I said, there's a suggestion book. But I'm still new to this community. 2 years is not a long time. So in terms of if people feel like there's something that we're missing, we want to know, and you can write to us. You can email me. It's gm@fiddleheadsfood.coop. So there's lots of ways.
Now, I know you only have about 1 minute left, but you went to a conference recently, and Fiddleheads is now part of
the National
just
Cooperative Grocers.
So
And
what
that's
does that
basically,
mean?
there are about 140 different co-ops across the country that are members of this larger co-op. It's a purchasing co-op. And so they negotiate better pricing for us on national products, many of the center store kind of pasta sauces and things like that. And they also negotiate service contracts with various companies across the country to do things like linen service and things. They provide training and development for staff, so they do conferences around different specialties like produce and fresh foods and marketing and things. And they provide peer support, so you get to meet people from other co-ops and share ideas and collaborate resources. There's a lot of marketing stuff that they offer to us. And so we pay dues into that co-op, and then they pay us back revenues, we haven't gotten patronage revenues yet, but we will after our first year of full membership, which we started in August. So there's a sort of give and take that happens with some co-ops, and we're very pleased to be a part of it.
So would you say the trend is nowadays for co-ops to get more organized and for more co-ops to get organized?
I think there's a real opportunity for more cross-sector co-ops. So they're more partnering with agricultural co-ops, partnering with distribution co-ops, partnering with retail co-ops. But I think that the National Co-op Grocers has been a phenomenal resource for food co-ops across the country. And I think that there's more work to be done in organizing the larger movement.
Isn't there always?
So
this
You're
weekend,
have shows forever.
On Saturday is the Fresh Early Plant Sale, 10 to noon.
Yes.
And Sunday, the Walk to End Homelessness, the Earth Day at the co-op. And on Saturday as well, I don't think I have a lot of information at McCook Point in Niantic. There is a whole list of Earth Day activities. So whatever you want to do this weekend that's related to Earth Day, sustainability,
Yes.
there is a lot going on.
And one thing I forgot to mention is one of our Neighborly Nichols sponsor recipients this time is Connecticut League of Conservation Voters. And so we're going to be giving out, there's a little pamphlet that talks about the legislative agenda that we can influence as Connecticut residents to improve our environment. So.
Well, thanks for coming on, Lexa.
Thank you.
It took us a little while to get the logistics together, but I'm glad it
I'm
worked.
glad it worked out as well.
And I hope that people come to the co-op this weekend and, of course, beyond this weekend as well.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.